Okay, peeps, welcome back. So today we're going to talk about Bitcoin and the altcoin markets and how potentially there may be a really extremely rare buying opportunity on the horizon. So with that being said, let's get it. All right. So first thing I want to mention just real quick, well, a couple of things. So number one, FOMC meeting happened. We'll talk more about this in our macro video that we're going to do soon. But the most important takeaway from this: rates did not change. Markets loved it. They went up, and apparently the Fed is satisfied with the route that they're on. So that creates some level of certainty in the markets, which means that markets can rally. Okay, so good sign for markets. Second thing I want to mention is that there was one person that signed up for the channel memberships. Again, if you guys want to do it, you can. If you don't want to, you don't have to. It's entirely your choice. But the benefit of signing up for the memberships is you'll get access to the content anytime you need, snap of a finger, and you will not have to wait for the scheduled times to actually view the content. So with that being said, if you guys don't see the content listed as premiere, it does not mean it's not going to post. It just means that it, unfortunately, for some reason, YouTube does it this way, where if we have it listed from members to public, which we have to do when members are paying for memberships. There's nothing I can do about that. I didn't create YouTube. I don't decide what the rules are, but it for some reason it chooses not to show as premiere. So the content will still be at 6 a.m. and 5 p.m. every day. Maybe with rare exceptions, if I get off work late or something like that, then it may be a little bit later in the day. But for the most part, it is going to be 6 a.m. and 5 p.m. Respectively, Pacific Standard Time. So if you guys don't see a premiere, doesn't mean it's not coming out. It just means that it's not visible, and you guys are just going to have to wait for that time for it to show up. Okay, so now let's go into Bitcoin. So what is this rare signal I'm talking about? Well, as you guys know, we did talk about this on X. We have actually given you guys early access to this because we felt like the signal is so important that you guys need to know about it right away. So it's relevant to you. And again, by the time you see this, and this is why it's important to follow us on X. If you guys don't want to, it's your call. But again, we may not get around to making a video on this for a couple of days. So whatever you choose to do with that, that's entirely your call. We can't control that. So, anyways, so the rare signal here is the MACD death cross on the weekly time frame. So I'm going to show you guys this going throughout history. Okay, so we have a MACD death cross here that's just starting to form. The histogram just starting to turn red. What does this mean? It means likely we're going to see a larger drop. How big exactly? Well, last time we saw a MACD death cross here, you guys know that was the bear market coming into play after the bull market top. This was the mid-cycle peak back here in April 2021. So these large drops happened right around the time that we got the MACD death cross. Again, the timing is not perfect, but it's still relatively close. So that first drop in 2021, 55%. Second drop was even bigger. It was about 77%. Of course, this was not the bear market top, and we knew that because it held monthly support. And again, that's the reason why we use multiple indicators. So we'll just show you that real quick on the monthly support. So even though we got a MACD death cross on the weekly, it did not break monthly support down here after this large drop, which is why, again, we were convinced that the bull market was not over. And turns out we were right. So we ended up getting the bull market top later in November. So we're going to go back in further in history and take a look at these just so you understand how relevant these really are. All right, so 2019, you guys, and what we're looking for here is not just a MACD death cross. We're looking for one where the MACD has a death cross that is way, way above the break-even level, okay? Like it's obvious that it's overextended. That's what we're looking for. So 2019, again, it did happen. Took a little bit longer than expected. The peak was actually a few months before we even got the signal, but for those of you guys that wanted the exact signal, I suppose you could go down to the daily time frame. So the move from swing high to swing low overall was 71%, but then from the MACD, which was right about here, it was still pretty large. So you actually would have only potentially lost like you basically you would have given up about 6% by waiting for the MACD death cross. Again, this is not an exact indicator, but it either times it perfectly or it kind of foreshadows what may be about to come. So that's kind of the point here. And again, the MACD death cross, as you guys can see, wasn't perfect. Again, if we overlay this actually with the pi cycle top indicator, and again, I'll type this in, pi cycle top indicator, you guys can see the pi cycle top indicator nailed it perfectly, whereas the MACD death cross came later. And again, I mean, that's something to keep in mind. So this is the reason why we use multiple different indicators in confluence with one another, like the weekly, monthly trend lines, support and resistance, the pi cycle top, MACD, RSI, bullish, bearish divergence, all that kind of stuff. So let's go even further back in time because we really want to try to see just how accurate this indicator is. So you guys can see back here, this one not so obvious, and it was actually quite a bit late. By the time we got around to it, there was a bottom, so it's not a perfect indicator, as you guys know. But again, this is back in the 2013 peak, so this was a long time ago. This was almost a decade ago. And if I'm not mistaken, I believe the pi cycle top indicator is actually retrofitted, so it was not made until, I want to say, the last cycle, but it gets retrofitted in going back in time. So that's why it looks like it's accurate, but this indicator is actually quite new for an overall trading indicator. I'm pretty confident the EMAs, the RSI, and the MACD are much older than the pi cycle top. So again, you got your massively overextended MACD death cross. And what did we get? And again, this is not the pi cycle top. We're just using the MACD here. You can see the move down was absolutely monstrous. It was 82%. Of course, this was early in Bitcoin's inception, so that shouldn't really surprise anybody. But the point here is to signal that, when we do get these MACD death crosses, the drops are pretty huge. So even from like this first massive cycle peak, you guys can see right here, even from, let's say, right here down to the bottom, I mean, it's still a nasty drop. It was about 37%. So let's go back. Got to try to zoom out here so you guys can actually see this stuff. I'll be honest, I'm actually really quite happy that the Fed came out and said that they expect that they're not going to change rate. They're not looking at hiking rates or changing anything really for that matter. I think, once again, the markets love certainties. So if the Fed and Congress do absolutely nothing, that's the best case scenario for markets. That's the perfect bull scenario, because if nothing gets done, the markets can be sure nothing's going to get done, and therefore they can just keep moving higher because there's not going to be anything that's going to change things for the markets, if you guys understand what I'm saying. So best case scenario, definitely very happy with the FOMC. Could have been worse, honestly. I mean, our portfolios personally are down quite a bit as a result, unfortunately, but that is the nature of investing. Learning to master emotions is a very hard thing, even for us, after all this time. So once again, going back to the MACD death cross, it is here. So where could we potentially bottom out? Well, there's a bunch of different zones. You can see all these different white lines we have here going across. That's kind of potential areas we could hit. So 53,000 would be on this breakout point down here. And then we have 49,000, which of course was the bear market swing high. That's a substantial level, because once we got past that point, that essentially guaranteed that bulls were in control. And well, that's exactly what happens. So next level would be somewhere around this channel, so 44.5 to about 40,000. And below that, you'd be looking at support again between 30 to 37,000. Is it possible that it can go down to 37,000? Absolutely. I'm not going to say it's not. Again, I want to go back out to the monthly time frame here and show you guys this, but you can see in the previous bull market cycle we had, basically from the swing low here, as you guys can see, this is not perfectly aligned, but It's actually quite difficult to get lined up perfectly, but you guys can see that from this first green candle here to the many green candles that we had, obviously, um, it did go up from that point. Then it came back, retested it, went up, and as soon as we got the close below on, if I'm not mistaken, I got to line these up perfectly. So you got your candle body touching the trend line there. Once we got this candle close below this trend line, that was our indication that the bull market was over. And of course, um, the market had already dropped by a massive 33%, but we did take some losses, but we came out green overall, and I think that's kind of what matters. So, as far as I'm concerned right now, I would say as long as we hold either one or both, especially both of these trend lines, I would say we're good. Again, this trend line is going from the parabolic move all the way up, so this is not going to be exactly perfect, but I think that's probably going to be about right. So that current level is roughly about 53,000. Again, it would not surprise me if that held as support, because again, you have your 52,000 level right there, roughly around where that channel is. That is a major level. That does also show up around that level on the pi cycle top indicator, which we're going to get into in a minute. But the important thing here is, so long as we do not break this trend line right here or this trend line right here, there's no reason to be worried. But again, the MACD death cross does kind of give us a bearish signal. So the fact that we're above the trend lines is bullish. The fact that the MACD has had a death cross is bearish. And the MACD indicator is very accurate on Bitcoin over history, as you guys have seen. So it's hard to say exactly where it could go. Again, we've given you the targets. So first target would be 53,000, which is the trend line channel. This breakout point here too. And then of course the swing high on bear markets, 48,000. And then below that, the trend line, the respective white lines over there. And then the trend line down here at 35,000. So as long as we don't go below 35,000, I would say we're good. So, yeah, we're not going to get into CoinGecko in this video because it's going to get too long, but we'll go over some other stuff. So crypto, search term on Google, again, it's very low. If we go over here to how to buy crypto, and do understand we're in quantitative tightening currently, whereas in the last bull cycle, we were in quantitative easing. So there was lots of people out there that had lots of money to be able to go invest and just blow on whatever they wanted. Doesn't mean the markets can't go up, okay? It just means that there's going to be probably less people that maybe can afford to invest in these markets. Not a guarantee, though. Of course, if the Fed starts cutting rates at the end of the year and the bull market doesn't start till the end of the year, well, then that's perfect timing. It allows the retail space to start FOMOing in, and we're buying at the bottom, so it's good for us. But again, crypto is kind of really low on the spectrum here, as you guys can see, or how to buy crypto. So that's very good for us. That means we're early in this space. If we start seeing something crazy like this over here, where we get a 95, 150, something like that, that's how you know that things have gotten absolutely bonkers and maybe it's time to take some profits. So again, Bitcoin, it's only at a 27. Last time it peaked, it was at 81. And then you have like 100 and 100 and maybe like a 90 over here. And if we type in how to buy Bitcoin, again, it's pretty low. It was higher back here during the, around the time of the spot Bitcoin ETFs, but we didn't see anything like we saw back here. So that kind of leads me to believe potentially we might be in a mid-cycle peak. Again, a mid-cycle peak can drop substantially. The mid-cycle peak in 2013 went down about 40%, and the one in 2021 went down about 55%. So anything's possible here. So the fear and greed index is in the neutral territory. If I'm being completely honest with y'all, I have no idea what direction this is going to go. I'm leaning more towards the fear side, but if it goes straight back up, that's cool too. We still have plenty of money invested in crypto, so not a big deal. MVRV, I would say we're still very undervalued at this point on the MVRV. This thing is not even close to all-time highs. So the first peak we had back here, as you guys can see, hit the pink box. And every time we get into that pink box, that pretty much lines up perfectly with the cycle tops, with the exception of this one here in November. But again, that's why we use multiple indicators in confluence with each other. So Bitcoin rainbow price chart, again, it's still in the buy territory. Something I do want to point out here to you guys, I don't know if you can notice this, but so these horizontal lines are vertical lines here, I should say. The ones going straight up. Every single time we have a halving, if you guys notice, shortly after that halving event, the price does sell off and or go sideways. If you guys look closely at the black kind of squiggly line, that's the price. You guys can see that we do generally go either sideways and or down. Kind of maybe with the exception of the first Bitcoin halving, but yeah, pretty much we're still in the buy zone. Not even close to anywhere to where the top could be, in my opinion. I mean, if we get to at least something like this, like a hodl, or is this the bubble, or FOMO intensifies, if we get to anything close to that, I would say maybe it's time to start scaling out. But of course, you guys can do what you want to with your own money. So Nupal, this one is a little bit more bearish looking. It's pretty high up here, but then again, I mean, Bitcoin bottomed out at 15K and it's currently at like 60K. So, and we're not supposed to see this indicator top out until later in the year. So from this perspective, I would say Bitcoin's a little expensive, but there is still some potential for alts, even in the immediate short term. So again, the pi cycle top indicator, pretty much what we're looking for here is a crossing of the lines. Every time it hit this green line up here, we did retest it and kind of pull back, and then eventually went up from there. I'll show you guys that in a minute. So the current level for these lines is 57,000 on the yellow line, and then 80,000 on the green line. For this to extend out longer, for the bull run to take longer, I would say it's good for us to have a correction. Because if we don't, then the bull market will be much more short-lived and the gains will not be as substantial. And that we do not want. So, if you guys want the bull run to be quick, I mean, it could be, but then you might not make as much money and it would be much harder to predict when to get out. And it's just my personal opinion, but I don't think that's good for anybody. So, again, we're looking for a crossing of the yellow and the green lines. Haven't seen that yet, which indicates to me that likely the top is not in. We also have not seen the lines get close to each other yet, like substantially close to each other, like something like right here. In case it does not cross, we want to see them get very close, just to kind of indicate that maybe we're about ready to hit that point. But as you guys can see, every time we hit this yellow band, before we get to the peak, it does kind of bounce, then it pulls back from the green band, then bounces, and it kind of gets wedged in between the two until eventually it breaks out. And then the lines ultimately cross, and that is basically the pi cycle top right there. So we are still early, in my opinion. We have not broken out of the green line yet, which we saw here. We saw in this cycle. We saw in this cycle. So we are at the very least expecting a breakout above the green line. We have not gotten it yet. So based on that, I would say that the cycle top is not yet in. We're going to make a separate video for the miners from now on because there's a lot to cover just on Bitcoin. But we are also going to cover some altcoin stuff here too. So let's actually go over the Bitcoin dominance first. So once again, we're kind of looking for a sell-off of the Bitcoin dominance. If this happens, this would indicate to us that likely altcoins are going to start popping off like crazy. You guys are going to see insane gains if you have altcoins or anything altcoin related. Maybe with the exception of BCHG and LTCN, it's hard to say if those are going to pop off when Bitcoin does or if those are going to pop off when altcoins do. Generally speaking, LTCN, BCHG pop off when Bitcoin does. But we've only ever seen one cycle to go back and look at in history. So we really don't know the true depth of what these things can do yet. But it does look like we might be about ready to break this trend line or getting pretty close to it. So that possibly could lead us into an alt season. We don't know yet. But again, if we get a break of the trend line, we want to see some kind of waterfall moment, which we have not seen yet. And this is ideally when Bitcoin tops out. So again, you guys can see something very similar happened here. Then we had a waterfall moment. This was when Bitcoin was at its peak. And then boom, money flowed from Bitcoin into altcoins. And then altcoins started moonshotting, doing crazy, crazy returns. So as far as that indicator is concerned, Bitcoin is still dominant. Money is flowing from basically from crypto into USDT. Again, every time this thing goes down and hits the trend line, that usually indicates some kind of peak on Bitcoin. As you can see, the Bitcoin top was roughly around this time frame, and also in November of the previous cycle. Then we have, of course, the pandemic back here, and then the wasn't exactly perfect, but kind of the top for the 2019 mini bull run, and so on and so on. But basically, anytime this thing hits the trend line, there's a potential for a reversal, and the money might flow from crypto back into stable coins because, of course, stable coins are basically equal to the dollar. They don't really do much, but you're not going to lose a lot of money on stable coins unless Tether in USDC, unless you had something like the Terra Luna stablecoin. Okay, so one more thing here that I would like to go over. Well, actually, I take that back. Two things. So again, the total market cap here, I'd like to point this out. This goes for not just Bitcoin, but all of the altcoins. So the low for this before the previous halving was 123 billion. The peak was 3 trillion. So this thing did nearly like a 25x from the lows. And again, the low here was 744 billion, and the peak as of late was 2.7 trillion. So it only did about a 3x. Let's just put it like this. If it only does half of what it previously did, assuming there's diminishing returns, so if it did a 25x before, maybe a 12x, we should ideally see the total market cap go from about 700 billion to $10 trillion. Okay. So I want to show you guys what that looks like. So 7.3 times 12. Okay. Well, let's actually do this with real numbers here. So I'm not sure this is even going to calculate. We're going to find out in a minute. So 700, we'll just go 736 billion times 12. Okay, so this is, if my numbers are correct here, this is what we should see. So basically just shy of roughly about $9 trillion. However, if we see the 12 and a half, so this thing is basically halved perfectly. So you get 736 billion times 12.5, which I mean still is that's an amazing return. We'd be in the total market cap ideally by the cycle peak should be about 9.2 trillion. I know it sounds crazy, but again, we did hit almost 3 trillion again, so you're only talking about a 3x from that point. It's not really that much. Now, as for the altcoin market cap, I mean, again, we are kind of hitting resistance here, so it would not surprise me if we came back down and kind of tested this previous support as a potential bottom indicator for the altcoins if Bitcoin is to correct bigly based on the MACD. So that would be a pretty substantial drop. But again, pick your poison. I mean, these are risk-on assets, so you could either just DCA in or choose to wait. I mean, how you choose to do it is entirely up to you. We're not sure what we're going to do yet in regards to this. We're going to take a couple of days to think about it and kind of try to understand what our plans are going to be next. We usually don't like to make moves too quickly because then we feel like we haven't thought things through thoroughly. But the drop on altcoins based on the total 3 market cap could be about 26%. Do I think it's that we're at a cycle peak? No. I mean, again, you saw it drop here and then it kind of blasted off higher. I mean, from peak to peak here, it wasn't a 3x, but it was still a 15% move. So I don't think I don't think this is the peak here, if I'm being completely honest. And I mean, could it not go up to 9 trillion? Yeah, sure. But I mean, even if it just went back up to 3 trillion, I mean, you're talking a huge, or not 3 trillion, but I mean, the peak up here at 1.13 trillion, you're talking a huge increase on altcoins. So even just that would be 89%. Anyways, this is our video on Bitcoin and the altcoins. Hope y'all enjoyed this content. Please like, comment, and subscribe, and we'll see y'all later. Peace.